Well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dave Watt because I think he's going to be the person who's going to help us kind of figure out some of those puzzles. I'm sure everybody here has had an experience much like Joel. So I'm just going to ask everybody to cast their mind back to when Nike first introduced their waffle sole runner in the United Kingdom. That's when Dave Watt started running when he was about 13 years old and has run ever since. Dave was the Scottish orienteering champion in 1976 and was at that time running with a trail map and compass. I don't know how to relate this next thing. He tells me that he spent his honeymoon competing in the Carrymore Mountain Marathon, and that his new wife apparently stayed at home with his folks. So Dave's mostly a mountaineer and an outdoor person. He's currently a professional mountain guide with the American Mountain Guides Association. He approaches wilderness trail running as a mountaineer and an outdoor professional, not so much as a street runner that's converted to trails. His claim to fame, running-wise, include having done the Goofy Challenge at Walt Disney World. Is that in Florida or is that in California? That's in California. Florida, excellent. And his last organized trail run was the Moab Trail Marathon. He says he prefers to run without a million other people. His longest runs have been at or just beyond the marathon length, and he loves running in the deserts of the United States, of the U.S. Southwest. So he says he loves landscape and that he usually runs with a camera. His day job is as the leader of Rocky Mountain Adventure Medicine. You may know him from the courses that he runs in collaboration with the University of Calgary. Actually, I think Rocky Mountain has been a big presence at ultra events across Alberta as well, too. Isn't that true, Dave?
Yeah, we provided medical coverage for Sinister 7 since its inception. Up until about 2 years ago, we dropped out. We stopped covering races about 2 years ago, and also the death race. So we're used to seeing running injuries, as well as incurring them ourselves. Yeah, we basically run a lot of wilderness first aid courses. In fact, for you folks in Canmore, we also run them out of Yamnaska Mountain Adventures there in Canmore. So that keeps us kind of busy.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for making the time to talk with us tonight. I was really looking forward to talking to you again. I had an opportunity last fall. I think we did a phone interview for a piece that I put together for Canadian Running. And I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, one of the things I love about writing is getting a chance to talk to interesting people. But I really, the interview that you participated in was a real highlight. So I'm going to open with some questions here. And I'm curious, given all of your experience and the work that you've done on trail races and, in terms of your own running, what do you see as being the most common medical issues, for trail runners?
Well, what I see as the most common issues and what I suffer from are two different things. I was blessed with feet that don't blister. I'm sorry, but they just don't blister. However, in all our experience dealing with trail runners, probably that's the most common thing we get asked to do, is by the time we get to see people's feet, they are almost unsalvageable. They're white, they're puffy, they're ripped, their blisters are broken, they're a mess. And that's probably the most common things that we see in terms of volume. We've seen a few other things, other common things in certainly the ultramarathons that we cover are more gastrointestinal problems, with people not able to keep down any nutrition, starting to vomit, and getting very concerned about the fact that, hydration becomes an issue, energy levels become an issue. That's a fairly common thing that we see.
And one of the things that's interesting about running in Alberta is that we can run in extremes, right? So we have weather like we have tonight, where it might be 25 or 30 degrees in August, but many of us run through the seasons into winter when it can be as cold as -10 or -20 or colder for runners who were braver. What kinds of changes do you see in terms of the injuries that you experience or that you hear about with these kinds of changes in weather and season, geography, the amount of distance that we run? How do the injuries change?
Well, you one of the things that happens is that you don't only just acclimatize to things like altitude, you also acclimatize to heat or cold. Your body actually goes through some adaptations where it's better able to cope with excessive heat or with excessive cold. But of course, here in Alberta, we sometimes are training. I'm thinking back to one particular incident, probably the only incident of heat stroke I've ever had to deal with. And just for our folks' knowledge, I'm actually an advanced care paramedic in the province of Alberta too. So we deal with a high level of medical intervention. And this was during one of the Sinister races. It had been a terrible, terrible spring, so very cold, very wet, very miserable. And the weekend of the Sinister Seven was our first real blast of summer, and it came with a vengeance. And so we went from, as I say, the 10-degree, 12-degree days of miserable rain and cold to a 36-degree day, brilliant sunshine. And there's a few factors. And so we've got someone now on leg 3, so had been running for a while. The area she was in when we found her was open, fallen timber, a burnt timber area, no cover, no shade. It was actually the ambient temperature in that area was 36 degrees. The transition areas had run out of water. So the organizers had kind of miscalculated with this sudden blast of heat how much water people would go through. And unfortunately, the volunteers were not restricting people just to use the water for drinking. They were letting them pour it all over themselves and try to cool themselves down. And so they ran out of drinking water. And by the time we found this poor individual, she was actively seizing, eyes rolled back, covered in vomit. It was a really bad situation. And we had to actually intervene at quite a high level, which we were there to do. And then, of course, transport her out of the area. And as I say, heat stroke is very rare in this part of the world. We don't usually see it. Our conditions aren't right for it. But she had met those conditions that day, pushing herself, unacclimatized, no water, hot environment. And, she spent 3-4 days in hospital while they tried to sort everything out. So when people tell you that, last weekend it was hot and I had some heat stroke last weekend and it's Monday morning and they've got a smile on their face, you can basically look at them and say, you didn't have heat stroke, because that's not how it works. So that was, there's because of our rapid change in weather patterns. And again, and I go back to Sinister, we have these hot days, the runners for the hot days, and then at night it starts raining and people are up high. And now we're dealing with the other end. We're dealing with hypothermic people. And obviously, the tireder you get, the less resources your body have to cope with everything. And so when something goes wrong, something can escalate very quickly. And I hate to say it, but and I understand why. Trail runners, ultramarathoners are very, very loath to carry anything extra. They're going to, take the stitching out of their jacket if they think it'll save them a half a gram here, and do this and do that. And that's all fine and well until something happens and the body can't move anymore. And then they can get into trouble pretty quickly.
What I think I hear you saying, I know lots of folks on the call are interested in terms of what it is that you've put in your first aid pack, but I want to ask this question, which is around prevention and preparation. So when I hear that story from Sinister Seven and some of the other stories that you've shared with me, I get the sense that a lot of this is also about being prepared So in terms of understanding the conditions, physical fitness, nutrition, carrying the right things with you, even if they're not necessarily first aid. Could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the role of preparation, being ready for your run and how it affects your health when you're out there?
Yeah, and we use this process in all our wilderness first aid courses, not just to do with trail running. We call it our 9 steps. In any kind of emergency, there needs to be 9 steps for a good outcome. However, the first 2 steps are before anything happens, before anything goes wrong. The first 2 steps are the important ones. And the first one is the pre-planning, and simply thinking about the 5 W's: what, where, when, why, and who. And understanding those things. So, things like, what is it you're going to do? What is the trail like that you're going to do? What are you going to carry with you? Are there water stops along the way? Are you going to have to carry water to last you 10 miles without a transition area? Do you need to carry something to clean water? So if you're not wanting to carry it, are you carrying something that will let you clean water from streams as you make progress? A backup plan. What are you carrying to communicate with? And I can get into that a bit more. But also, what clothing? So again, when the body is active, the body produces a lot of heat. We get 80% of our heat from our skeletal muscle movement. 80% of our total body temperature comes from that skeletal muscle movement. So when you're running, you're actually producing a lot of heat. And your body compensates for that by allowing you to lose that extra heat. And so it keeps the status quo. However, as a runner, if you're not running and you're not moving, you're not producing heat. So what are you going to put on to now help you maintain the heat that you have and not lose the excess heat? Where is the trail? Again, you can't ask what's and where's and why's without overlapping them. But again, it's a difference in where the trail is. So for example, I trail run today in 32-degree heat. I shortened my distance. I didn't take any water with me because I wasn't going to go very far. I only did 8K. But I was probably never further than about 500 meters, even though I was on trails the whole time. I was never more than 500 meters from a paved road. So I've got an escape plan very easily if I get into any kind of trouble. So again, where are you going? Are you going to be miles from nowhere? When, of course, is the big one. Is it summer? Is it winter? And again, those by themselves have different connotations. In summer, we tend to want to plan longer, bigger trails, be out there for longer periods of time. And if we do have to sit a night out, in summer, it's usually not the end of the world. It's going to be miserable, it's going to be cold, but there's things you can do, and it's not going to be the end of the world. But in winter, when we're trail running, with shorter days, less access to rescue should we need it, and the fact it's going to go dark at 4:30 and not get light till 8 o'clock the next morning, you better have a few extra things in your pack, because if something goes wrong, it's going to be tricky. And I hate to say it, but building these shelters from nothing, from twigs, or building a snow shelter or something like that, is a very intense activity. And then the other thing I think big before we get into trouble is the self-leadership thing, is the self-awareness. Knowing who you are as a runner. What kind of things challenge you? What kind of terrain really is awkward for you? Or knowing that you don't do well in heat. And I always say to people, if this is the weekend to go and do your trail run, you've been planning this trail run, and yet the day dawns and the weather's not what you really need it to be, have a plan B. Choose shorter trail, a lower trail, don't go as high. Have a plan B that's a great second backup, so you're not faced with that dilemma of, well, I've done all this planning and I think I should just go for it anyway, because that's potentially when you're going to, come unstuck. We call it dealing with the small I principle. So when incidents happen in the backcountry, they're very rarely one event. They're usually a combination of things. And so it's having that self-awareness to think about what those small things might be. Is it a little hot spot that isn't usually there? Is it some chafing that isn't usually there? Is it that the trail isn't in the right condition for you? It's been raining the week before, it's been snowing the week before. There's been a huge windstorm and it's knocked trees over, and now we're clambering over trees versus just running on the trail. Setting mileposts for yourself on a trail. Setting things like a trail junction and kind of guesstimating, if I'm not there by 11 o'clock in the morning or something, I'm not going as well. What's going to happen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 5 o'clock in the afternoon? We ran into this in the ultra marathons. We always, as the medical team, as the safety team, we're always kicking ourselves with when race organizers extend that cutoff time. Oh, well, so-and-so didn't meet that checkpoint, but you know what? He's still got enough time. People tend not to get faster as the day goes on. It's a strange thing. But unless you're going to be running downhill at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be faster at the end of the day. So set your mileposts, and if you're not meeting them, there's nothing wrong with taking the intelligent walk, the walk back to the trailhead. Turn around. The trail will be there next week, next month, or this year I had some trails I wanted to run. They'll be there next year. Nobody's going to take them away.
That's great advice to remember. It's certainly something we talk about in ski touring, isn't it? That if the avalanche conditions aren't what we want them to be, there's always beer and French fries at the bar. I just want to recognize, Caitlin, I did get your question in the chat. I'm sorry, I should have picked that up a little bit earlier, but I am going to throw it open to folks in the room. Dave, I'm sure that you have your own kind of rituals that you do as you head out the door on your trail run. But I'm going to ask folks, I'm going to ask if anybody would like to volunteer, maybe how they like to get ready, if they have any tips that they like to use to remember to check on things before they head out the door. Anybody want to volunteer a tip or an idea for what they do to make sure they're well prepared?
I check SpotWX. I make sure that I check the weather for the exact area that I'm going and look at different weather models. And then that helps with making sure that the day that I had planned matches up with kind of what the weather's saying and what I have in my pack.
Right on, right on. That's a great tip. Other tips from folks?
I think it's something we like at the store we see really often is people underestimating how much time they're gonna be out for.
Yeah,
it's really classic. Even ourselves, this is about this much distance and like about this much elevation, and like honestly, I think systematically we tend to think it's gonna be shorter than it actually is.
And that's why setting those mileposts, before you get to the end point or the point of no return, where to get back is longer than to turn around. It's not a bad idea because we all have different days, right? There's some days when you could run forever, and there's other days when it takes you all your time to go around the corner.
Other tips that people have for preparing for their trail runs? My favorite is just keeping a couple of packs around, to be honest with you, because I'm getting old and I can't really remember what I'm supposed to take or not. So sometimes I'll have the light one and I'll take the heavy one, and I'll have my vest packed for certain types of runs, and then I'll pick based on what it is that I think I'm going to be doing that day. Yeah,
I think like a good example also is like when people plan their calories, like we do a long run and then, oh, I'm going to be out for about that much time, and then, oh, it's about this much calories per hour and that much water, and then like thinking about like, oh, well, in case it takes me 15% more, I should bring a bit more of this and that, right? Like kind of, you know, going for shorter, but planning for a bit more in what you're going for, so that you don't get in trouble if, you know, you're slower than expected. That's always something that personally I'm like always like, oh, I have like a couple extra gels that I know I don't need, but I'm still gonna bring them, and I have like a bit more of this, a bit more of that. You know, I have like, it's a wind shell day, but I bring a taped seam just because like if something rolls in, then at least you're gonna be dry, like that kind of stuff.
I'm curious here. So this is kind of a New Zealand, this is sort of a New Zealand word, but how many people here register an intention before they go on their trip? So they leave their plans with somebody else with sort of a drop dead time if they're not back in contact again. Does anybody do that here? Dave, any thoughts about the use of intentions or leaving plans with people?
I think one of the things for me is I've heard a couple of people so far talk about spot devices and inReach devices and communication devices when things go wrong. But I hate to say it, these are electronic toys that have been known to fail at the wrong time. And it doesn't hurt to leave that route plan with somebody. However, we also work very closely with the conservation officers and the rescue folks in Kananaska's country, and they'll tell you, you need to be specific. So if you're going to a trailhead, which car are you going to take? Are we okay?
Yeah, I'm just talking to my light switch right now. Excuse me.
Yeah, just leave that plan, but then your commitment is to make sure you stick to your plan. Don't suddenly decide that actually, you know, the trail on the other side of the valley looks a lot better than the trail on this side of the valley. You got to stick to your plan and be very specific. So if you're going, as I say, if you're jumping in with a buddy, don't, you know, actually leave details of what that vehicle will be in a license plate, because, you know, talking with the CEOs, when they come through, the number of calls they get from somebody saying, my partner went out for a hike or a run today in Kananaska's country, they're not back yet. And then it's like, well, where were they going? Well, I'm not sure. They said they might go to that area. Okay. What car did they take? Well, I'm not sure if he went in his car or took his buddy's car. Well, what does his buddy drive? Well, I'm not sure what his buddy drives. And so I think it's a very good idea. I think you want to be really clear, and if you're going to leave that, then you stick to it. In search and rescue terms, when people don't sign back in and stuff like that, it gets known as the bastard search. In other words, where is the bastard? Well, yeah, I'm from Scotland. Usually the bastard was found in the bar. That was where usually they were found, because they had left this route plan, but they had forgot to check back in to say, hey, I'm off the trail, I'm out early, whatever. So great idea. You just got to be specific, and you want to follow through with it. And last but not least, when you leave your route plan with somebody, pick the most anal retentive friend that you have, the one that will actually make the phone call, not the one that'll fold a piece of paper up, put it in their pocket, and find it in a week's time.
Excellent. Great tips. So be careful how you pick your friends.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of the nuts and bolts. I know lots of people are really intrigued about talking about what you take with you, but I think one of the questions I want to ask first is, what kinds of things do people take with them that they don't even necessarily realize might be good first aid equipment or good rescue gear? What things have they already got on them that they may not necessarily think of as being useful?
Running poles.
Running poles?
Running poles.
Yep. Expensive sticks, running poles.
I think buffs seem to be a favorite. So unfortunately, neither Cindy Cathell or Andrea Lucky were able to join us tonight, but they were kind of the inspiration for this article when Andrea kind of slashed open her knee on a run with Gavin. If you want all the gory photos, they're actually up on Run Uphill's blog right now. But they talked a lot about using even the leg of a set of tights. So when Andrea slashed open her leg, she didn't realize it. When she pulled back her tights, she realized she had a problem. Cindy actually looked at the whole situation and said, maybe the best thing we can do is actually put the tights back on. They're the cleanest thing that we have. They provide some pressure, and they might be the safest thing that we have. What other things, Dave, do you see people wearing that they can use for first aid?
To stop bleeds and stuff, we've, as a running community, I was thinking about this today when I was running. We've outlawed cotton. Cotton is like this bad word that we shouldn't use. But in fact, in summer, cotton actually cools much faster than a lot of these tech materials that we use. For example, I swap in hot weather to a cotton ball cap from my technical ball cap, because when you soak your cotton ball cap, it holds that water for a lot longer and actually evaporates much slower. And therefore, quite often, put my hand up on my head. My head is cold. It's frozen cold because of the cotton. But the other thing that cotton is very good at is stopping bleeds. So you want to stop a bleed, you really want something that's the blood is going to soak into the matrix of the material and use that matrix to start to grow a clot. So I hate to say it, but cotton does have its place. And so when you're looking for improvisations on things to stop bleeds, even taking strips of cotton and packing them inside the wound itself. To heck with putting this pressure down on top of a severe bleed, we need to pack stuff inside the wound site. And if you can find cotton to do that versus, the technical running stuff that most of us wear, it's going to help to clot that blood faster. And then, of course, you put the pressure down on top of it. But the first thing you want to do is pack that cotton inside. And not to put too fine a point on it, but stop worrying about things that are clean, or sterile rather. Yeah, go for the cleanest thing you can find, but just don't worry about sterility. The body's got its own immune system. Western medicine does have a good range of antibiotics for things these days. And if we're packing wounds and really worried about them, that person's going to go to a medical facility where someone's going to take all that stuff out that you packed in there and clean it and give tetanus injections and give you antibiotics, as well as stitch it up. So you just need to stop that bleed. But yeah, things that are cotton are really good to carry.
So not a bad idea to carry that worn out old bandana kind of tucked in an outside pocket then or something.
Yeah.
What other, so I know that this is a difficult question to answer because you've said earlier that, it really changes based on your conditions and the situations that you're in. But do you kind of have a couple of one or two kind of foolproof items that you always include in a first aid kit?
Well, we have a small first aid kit here. So as a company, and I'm not doing a plug for the company, but we put these lightweight kits together. It's very hard to improvise certain things. It really is. You need to know what you've got. So this kit is 200 grams. And in there we've got a dressing to stop a severe bleed. We've got an 8x10 dressing in here that you could stop a severe bleed. Now, on one of our ultra marathons a couple of years ago, we were called to a girl who had taken a fall, ground level fall on a trail. And she had, without a word of a lie, I'm not exaggerating here, at least a 12-inch laceration on the outside of her thigh. And I could actually see her femur. I could actually see the bone through the cut. And it was huge. So, and again, on a piece of limestone. It's just a sharp piece of limestone, slit that open. And so packing stuff in that wound and then binding it with something to close it. So we've got a fairly big dressing in here. We've got a tensor bandage. We've got a cling bandage. We need to have something with us to stop a severe bleed, and that's what that's designed for. So if we're going to really minimize, can we stop a bad bleed? Things that are going to harm the person quickly. You know, we've all done first aid courses where we've got the ABCs, and sure, we can roll people into recovery positions, we can do mouth to mouth, we can do that kind of stuff. But when it comes to stopping a bleed, you want something that you can stop a bleed with. And so we've got that in here, as well as other bits and pieces that can be useful. Just to finish that thought, and I usually surprise people when I say that, literally, as I say, her thigh was spread, the outside of her thigh was spread open. You could see the femur. How much blood did she lose? And the answer is about a teaspoonful. You don't have any big blood vessels on the outside of your thighs. And there's a lot of meat there. And the meaty bits will actually retract the blood vessels into the meat and slow the bleeding down. So she was very, very lucky that she lost basically no blood at all. Some runners had stopped and actually had taken their sweaty shirts off and put them on the cut. We changed that out for some cleaner stuff, bound the thigh again using like tensor bandages to literally pull the thigh together on the cut itself. And if there is any bleeding, then the clot is going to form within that dressing that's inside now. And that's the important thing to do. Let the hospital worry about pulling that back out. That's their job. So lightweight kit here. I carried this. I ran from down in California last year. I ran from Tuolumne Meadows down to Yosemite Valley, about 25 miles. This is basically the kit I carried. So I've got my bleed kit. I also carry some, I don't know if you can see this, I've also got some chewable aspirins. I'm old. I'm an old fart. Old farts are known to get cardiac problems. I have some chewable aspirins. Not for runner's pain or anything like that, but if I think I'm going down the cardiac thing, I've got something I can do it with. Aspirin will stop 23% of people who are having heart attacks, conventional heart attacks, from going into cardiac arrest. So good bang for your buck. Other things, alcohol swabs, not to clean things with. We know that water is the best cleaner of cuts. Just if you would drink the water, if it's good enough to drink, it's good enough to clean a cut. But alcohol dries things. So it dries the skin and the sweat around the cut, and it'll let you stick tape to it or Band-Aids or steri strips or whatever you're going to try to stick to the skin. So something to really to dry the skin with. A couple of sting swabs. So if you got stung, it'll take the sting away. Skin tack. This is a sticky stuff. Again, you would put it on the sides of a cut. It'll help you keep the tape to it, especially if you're in a water environment. Dry the area off, put the skin tack on, wipe the skin tack on, and then put your tape over it. A couple of Band-Aids. One triangular bandage. Again, there are other ways that you could conduct or build a sling using a jacket just to put your arm in. So again, you're talking about running injuries, trips and falls. People have this habit of when you're heading for the ground at 9.81 meters per second, there you are heading for the ground. People tend to want to throw their hands out in front of them. When you do that, your wrists are in danger, your collarbones are in danger. Having to sling a broken limb, not a bad idea for a triangular bandage. But again, could do without that. We could use a jacket, we could use running tights, we could use a whole bunch of stuff that we're carrying. The tape that I carry, transport tape, this can actually take the place of steri-strip, so I can obviously hold things on like an improvised splint or whatever on, but it also, the way it tears, it actually forms steri-strips. And so if you're going to close a cut, you can dry it with your alcohol, put your skin tack on, and then close a cut together, pull the edges of the cut together with your steri-strips. And I, about 4 years ago, I had 4 surgeons inside my left knee fixing it. They said something, I'd been abusing my knee too much. I didn't quite understand that analysis, but 4 of them in there for 3 hours managed to fix my knee. But actually the scar, they held the outer scar together with steri-strips, and it healed very, very well. So great idea. Moleskin, again, I don't blister. I am so lucky I do not blister, but I carry moleskin in case I need to put something on. I also carry a few of these like second skin dressings. Again, if I get a hot spot, you can put that on, and so it will help to move the chafe spot away from the hot spot. And again, preventing the blister is super important. Just a non-stick dressing. Again, if I wanted a bit of padding, I can actually put it inside the Tegaderm dressing. I can cut a bit off. I do carry scissors that will actually cut something, and don't rely on the scissors on my Swiss Army knife to maybe cut something. And last but not least, I've got some burn gel, and sometimes the burn gel goes in those places that we don't usually talk about that like to chafe in the hot weather. And this will actually cool that area down quite nicely for you. But there again, another nice thing to put in a kit or have with you would be something like even just simple Vaseline. Yeah, you can buy some expensive Runner Glide stuff, but you can also put Vaseline on things, and again, will just help with that chafing. And there's one of those small eye incident things I was talking about, that chafing by itself isn't the end of the world, but when you're chafing and it hurts, you don't tend to run as fast. And now that trail is, and I can't remember, I'm sorry, it was Joel, was talking about when we try to overextend that distance. You know, we think, oh yeah, I can do that 20 miles or 30 miles, whatever it is. But when we're going slower than we planned for because of a simple chafe, then now we get stuck out overnight. Now it's like, okay, well, now do we lose the trail? Do we still see the trail? Do we fall on the trail? Are we at higher risk? Are we at more danger? That's where those small eye incidents can build up and lead to a bigger incident if we don't deal with them right at the time. So having a few bits and pieces is really important. And then
now, I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
No, you go ahead, please.
Well, I was just thinking, now I have a perfect excuse to explain my running times. I'll just blame it all on chafing. But
yeah.
I am curious, how often do you check the contents of your kit? I feel like I've got a collection of expired first aid kits, you know, in those horrible blue envelopes or those blue little bags. How often do you recommend people look at their kits?
Well, expiry dates are a plot. Things don't expire. Like if a package is open, then obviously it's not sterile anymore. So if it's a dressing and it's open, the package is burst, or it's got soaking wet, because a lot of them are paper packages, then maybe you should look at changing it out. But a lot of the expiry dates on gels and stuff like that, when they redo testing, they actually find out that the gel is as good as it was when it went into the package. Very, very briefly, a little bit off topic, but a thing on expiry dates. There was a study done at Johns Hopkins University in the US, and they looked at Narcan. And Narcan is the antidote for opiate overdose, right? Big, big topic right now. And they took 20-year out-of-date Narcan and they tested it for efficiency. And to pass the test, the Narcan had to be 90% efficient from what it was as new. of all the samples they tested, they failed one sample, 20 years out of date. And that sample failed at 89.3%.
Excellent. That's a hot tip for tonight.
So expiry dates, they're a plot. Like what? Like, I'm sorry, a Tylenol tablet has an expiry date? Really? That really hard little caplet has an expiry date on it? Yeah.
So folks, it's coming up on 8 minutes to the top of the hour here, and I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask their questions of Dave tonight. We'll go as long as you folks want to go. There's no fixed stop time this evening, but I'm sure you might have other plans. So if you've got any questions, feel welcome to open up your mic, start your camera, jump in. Actually, maybe Caitlin will jump in with your question about heat stroke. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, for sure. So my question revolves around heat stroke, and if that's not really an issue in this side of the world, if it is per se the day that it jumps from 10 degrees to 32 and you're out running, what are the signs that you should start to watch for before you get to that phase where you're having a seizure, your eyes are rolling back in your head? Like, how do you know that that's coming and when to stop?
Right. So the type of heat stroke that athletes are going to have is what we call exertional heat stroke, and not chronic heat stroke. Chronic heat stroke is what our older populations get when a big heat wave comes in. So exertional heat stroke is going to go through heat exhaustion first. And heat exhaustion really is a lack of enough water to cool you down. And so you're going to notice things like your extremities start to get, before you get to the heat stroke stage, that your extremities start to get kind of cool and maybe even goosebumpy. That you stop sweating, that you're not sweating nearly as much as you did before, that you're going through that thirst cycle, that you recognize the fact that your water intake is for some reason not what it should be. Either you have this gastrointestinal problem and you keep throwing up what you're trying to put down, or you've miscalculated and you don't have water. One of the things I did want to mention is that, you're better to drink from a stream without cleaning the water than allow yourself to get dehydrated and into heat exhaustion. Again, we live in a country here that is blessed with clean water, unless you're downstream from Farmer Joe's field and all these cows are in the water, but we've got clean water. Even if there's a bit of giardia there, it's going to take a week to 2 weeks to show up. You're better off just to drink from the stream. And yet again, on some of these races that we've done standbys for, people will get themselves incredibly dehydrated, and their excuse is, well, I didn't want to drink from the stream. Like, really? Okay, then we'll deal with it. So I think it's those things, watching that fluid balance, that fluid intake, drinking little bits often, heading off at the pass, realizing that if it suddenly dawns the day that it is 35 degrees, today isn't the day to set some kind of record, be that time or distance. Throttle it back. Check in with yourself. How do you feel? The people that get into these problems with this exertional heat stroke very often are very focused. Like they're pushing through things. They're ignoring these signals that their body's saying, hey, this isn't a good idea right now. And they're able to block that and push themselves through. So listen to what your body's telling you to do. And as I say, maybe today is the day to take the walk of intelligence. Turn around, stop, start walking, let it go kind of thing.
I'm going to encourage folks, if you do have questions, feel welcome to take yourself off mute, or if you're shy, feel welcome to drop a question in the chat box. Would anybody like to chime in?
A question and a comment. It's interesting because when you actually go to, I think in Europe, a lot of the races have mandatory gear, and it's not something we're used to here for racing. And I don't think we're used to that either when we are in the backcountry. But like when you actually do a race in Europe, the emergency blanket and like a couple other things are mandatory. Like they have it as part, like you can't take the start line if you don't have like, you know, the 5 or 6 items, like a communication device, an emergency blanket in case like a storm rolls in. And we actually ended up needing those for the Camor Quad Day. People got stuck on the OR on a Bluebird day in a hailstorm and used their emergency blankets this year in Camor. And yeah, they have like those kind of mandatory gear. I think like maybe that's something that here we're not so much used to, like to seeing, but you know, it doesn't have to be applied only to racing.
We just a quick comment on that. We work very closely with the organizers of Sinister 7 over the years. We've known the organizers for many years. When they were still the Full Moon in June company, we actually did the first standby for the very first Full Moon in June in 1994. But anyway, they used to have this mandatory gear list, and they moved away from it. And the reason was simple. Are you going to check everybody's gear? Are you going to do it at every checkpoint? Are you going to make sure that people don't ditch their gear? Because that happens. We saw it happen. So you say a survival blanket, people would cut the survival blanket in half. So now they're carrying a half a survival blanket. So now you have to measure a survival blanket and say it's got to be this size by that size. We saw people try to get around that compulsory gear. And so the organizers moved to this, here's what we suggest you carry, and we strongly suggest it. So now when you look on the back of the competitor's number, it says right there, this is the gear we suggest you carry. You are strongly advised to carry it. But we're not basically checking it. Because the other connotation of that is if I catch you with a piece of equipment missing, do I then disqualify you from the race? And how do we do that? Anyway, it was actually a conscious decision for that company and that racing community to say, we strongly advise, and we've got signposts everywhere. So everywhere you go on that race, you'll see what they advise you carry. It's up to you to carry it. At some point, somebody has got to take responsibility for their own actions somewhere.
So we're just coming up on the top of the hour, folks, and I haven't received any other questions through the chat. I'll ask one more question, and that way if anybody else wants to jam in another question, you feel welcome to do this. Before I ask though, Dave, I might ask if you would be willing to share that list of that little 200-gram first aid kit that you carry.
I can surely do that, yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit, and I know that you are in the business of training people in wilderness first aid, and so I have no doubt that you're an advocate for first aid training. But are there any sort of unexpected benefits, you know, beyond kind of learning the basics, learning some important knowledge? Are there any unexpected basics of taking a first aid course?
Well, again, we usually say that most accidents happen in the kitchen. And again, yeah, we when we do our wilderness first aid courses, of course, obviously we address all of the issues and problems that come when you're far from help. But on the other hand, we also, most of us work 9 to 5 somewhere in a city or a town because we need to earn money. Our family and friends, we go visit them, we go to the movie theater, we travel on public transport, being equipped just to deal and be comfortable in helping somebody who's in an emergency. One of the things, the benefit is a lot of people require a first aid certificate for their workplace. A lot of workplaces will say, we need you to have a standard first aid. We know that some of those companies will almost help that person, will pay a portion towards their wilderness first aid certificate if it's a wilderness first aid certificate that is recognized by occupational health and safety. That's my one thing I would suggest to people when you're looking for a wilderness first aid course, one that's recognized by occupational health and safety. And it's kind of a dual, I hate to use the expression because we have a pet cockatiel, but you've killed two birds with one stone. You know, you never know when you may have to do CPR on a work buddy. I won't pretend that CPR in the backcountry is a questionable skill, but it may be useful in your 9-to-5 day-to-day life. I think that's kind of important.
I think there's another good pro tip in that, which is that the next time they look for a volunteer for a floor warden, find out whether or not that maybe comes with some free first aid training.
Yep. Yeah.
So folks, we're at 8:02, and I think I'm going to wrap up this evening's session, first of all, by thanking Dave Watt, who is CEO with Rocky Mountain Adventure Medicine. This isn't meant to be an endorsement, but I did want to say thanks to Dave. I've taken 2 of your wilderness first aid courses in the last few years, recertified last summer, and I always really enjoy the field days. I find that they're a great learning experience, but it's also just really fun spending a day out in the outdoors with people from all kinds of different outdoor backgrounds, learning first aid stuff. So I'd recommend it highly. My little company pays for my first aid training, and I always appreciate getting a chance to work with your team.
One of the things I'd like to just echo there, when you do get that chance to mix with people who are, you know, mountain bikers, skiers, backpackers, climbers, there's learning just in talking to the rest of the group, not just the instructor. The instructor there facilitates that group learning. And even our instructors will actually learn things from course participants who are either come at something from a slightly different point of view, or say, have you ever thought about, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes off and it's like, oh, I see where this could go. So yeah, the field days are the best. They're the best. Yeah.
So we'll make sure to get Dave to send us his supply list for his 200-gram first aid kit. And as we've heard, don't hesitate to go into your basement and look for those quote unquote expired first aid kits. Those will be a great source of supplies. And I just want to thank everybody for joining tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Joel or Gavin or both of you to say the final words for this evening.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Dave. It was great to have your insight, and also feel like get some pointers and things to think about next time we get out. I think it's also a good kind of follow up on the article that Dave did a couple weeks ago, where like really, the bottom line is like whatever you bring, make sure you know how to use it as well, right? And that was like really kind of the big kind of take home message from a few weeks ago in the blog post. So yeah, well, that's awesome to have a bit more of a list this time, and some pointers for like, both accidents and both just like, planning. And yeah, I hope everybody got something out of it. And I'll definitely go back home and have a look at my first aid kit now.
And I'll encourage everybody. So this summer's been a little bit of an experiment. You've probably seen some blog posts that we've been doing at Run Uphill. And this is I'm not sure if is this your first Zoom meeting event? I know that you were doing some Learn to Runs, Joel. Have you been doing other sessions like this?
Yeah, we had a Learn to Run group that was like about 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But yeah, that's the first kind of, Zoom format we do. So yeah.
So please let us know what you think. Let us know if you enjoyed this evening, if the information was useful. Let us know if there are topics that you would like us to include in the blog posts. We use our Behind the Bench posts as an opportunity to talk about topics like this that are of interest to trail runners. And if you have a good story, if you have a great place that you run, if you'd like us to talk about something that you think is important for the rest of the Run Uphill community to hear about, please feel welcome to share that with us.
Maybe just one more thing for Dave Watt. If people are interested in like first aid courses or those things, where can they find you guys?
Well, we at our website, adventuremed.ca. There's a listing there. We are the provider at the University of Calgary and their outdoor program center offerings. So we offer our programs through there. Right now, of course, with what's going on, University of Calgary is a little, not sure exactly what's going to happen come fall. Our other big provider that we offer courses through is Yamnaska Mountain Adventures there in Canmore. So you can look there at their curriculum, their offerings. Our courses will be listed or on their site too. Yeah.
I have a tiny maybe comment or suggestion just about tape. Just a tip. I had a shoe blowout during Meet the Minotaur. So like that often happens and it's so unexpected, and kind of like Dave said, like you don't expect it, but that totally changes how fast you can run. So the next year I brought a roll of tape, and then I was like, man, that's so much tape. But I just blew up the soft flask and then threw a couple rolls, like wrap of tape around that soft flask. So it doesn't add that much weight at all. But then if you need it, and your comment about making it into steri strips, then it's a super lightweight way. Like I know people will wrap duct tape around Nalgene's, but it's like that similar idea with a soft flask.
Yeah.
And saving weight still, because some of you guys are super hardcore.
You can never have enough tape for anything. Backcountry skiing, mountain biking, camping, hiking.
And the old Canadian saying, if duct tape doesn't fix it, it really is broken.
Yeah. I was thinking, around a soft flask or even like your pole, just a couple wraps.
Yeah.
So folks, I've just posted up a couple of links for you in the chat box. We'll make sure that we share those with you. We'll make sure to go back and talk to Dave and get that list for you. But other than that, that's the conclusion for tonight. Feel welcome to send us some cards, letters, give us some advice on topics you'd like to hear about in the coming weeks. So thanks again, Dave Watt. Thanks, Joelle and Gavin, for having us. And thanks to everybody who was able to join us for tonight's session.